Man, it's chilly and rainy out in the Bay Area. And I feel that it's just been cold everywhere across America throughout this fall and now the start of this winter. It's not going to be that warm in Vegas either. Flying there tomorrow. 49ers going on Saturday. 49ers staying off of the strip in Henderson. Don't worry, I'll be on the strip or I'll be closer to the strip. But the 49ers, they don't want any of those New Year's Eve distractions in Vegas. They're going to be all the way out in Henderson and they're going to get in late on Saturday and they have a bunch of meetings and then they'll have all the players hit the hay and then they'll play the Raiders on Sunday, a game which has lost, I think, some luster with Derek Carr not playing anymore. No Chandler Jones, no Denzel Perryman for the Raiders. Jones and Perryman to IR. You still have some star power on that Las Vegas side. You still have Devontae Adams. You still have Darren Waller. You still have Josh Jacobs, NFL rushing leader. Josh Jacobs over 1,500 yards. You still have Max Crosby rushing the passer on the other side. But let's be honest, the Raiders aren't very good. And the fact that the Raiders aren't very good, plus the talent bleed that we've seen from them, intentional in the Derek Carr case, even though he wasn't having a good year, means that they're now 10-point underdogs to the 49ers. The 49ers should win this game without all too much trouble. But it's the NFL, so trouble can happen. Guy gets hurt, somebody turns the ball over, momentum. We'll see how they do against Jarrett Stidham. Jarrett Stidham is a Josh McDaniels quarterback. McDaniels, the former offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. The 49ers played the Patriots in 2020, empty stadium, COVID year. Cam Newton started that game for New England. He was relieved by Jarrett Stidham. The 49ers won 33-6. Stidham was 6 of 10 against them. An interception to former 49ers nickelback Jamar Taylor. Stidham also was at the Senior Bowl in January of 2019 when the 49ers coaching staff was one of the staffs of the Senior Bowl. So they got to work with Jarrett Stidham. He's only taken 61 total NFL passes over his years in the league. Baylor, and then 2 years at Auburn for Stidham. So he's very inexperienced. The book on him is that he's got a decent enough arm to make some of the throws that need to be made. Josh McDaniels brought him over from New England, so obviously he's decently comfortable enough to have Stidham run his system. But beyond that, he's a backup quarterback. Derek Carr was obviously the starter to begin this season for the Raiders, and Stidham wasn't. So, you look at this Raiders team, and it's a mediocre offense. DVOA is number 16. The defense is absolutely atrocious. Number 31 overall, number 32 pass defense. They don't have good corners. They don't have good safeties. Remember, they cut their former first-round pick, Jonathan Abram, earlier this season. The run defense in relation to the pass defense is okay, but it's still not very good. But now without Chandler Jones in there, that hurts the pass rush. It's Max Crosby is the player on this Raiders defense. And he's going to be working against Mike McGlinchey in this football game. And McGlinchey's been good this year. I got an article on him coming out tomorrow morning. Maybe talk about that in the AM before I head down to the facility. But Mike McGlinchey is an above-average pass protector and an above-average run blocker simultaneously for the first time in his NFL career. And this is, I don't want to say it's a crowning test, but it's a big test because Max Crosby lines up almost exclusively against right tackle. Anyway, it's a 49ers Raiders Q&A. Wanted to let the room fill up. Subscriber only chat. So if you want to ask a question, then please go ahead and subscribe, and then you can put the question up on the screen. Please just explain DVOA in detail from David Butler. Sure, and thank you. Defense adjusted value over average from Football Outsiders. So to explain, we have standard yards measurements, right? So if a team picks up 12 yards, then that's obviously a 12-yard gain. If a team picks up 6, that's a 6-yard gain. But that doesn't tell us the whole story. For example, on 3rd and 7, a 12-yard gain is worth a whole lot more than a 6-yard gain, right? Even exponentially more than it would be just based on the yardage difference. One of those picks up a first down, one of those doesn't. So DVOA allows us to quantify the importance of the 3-yard pickup on 3rd and 2 and how that's more important than the 6-yard pickup on 3rd and 8 or second down or first down. Every single that it ties in with EPA per play, right? EPA per play is measuring the expected points on any given portion of the football field versus the line to go. So it's a more efficient way, a more nuanced way of measuring progress for an offense or by extension, defense on the football field. DVOA takes it a step further by comparing performance in down and distance efficiency to other football teams around the league. So you're going to have an average baseline, and then you're going to see which teams are above the average baseline, which teams are below the average baseline, and it's also adjusted for opponent quality. That's where defense adjusted value over average comes in. So the 49ers leading the league in DVOA since week 8. They're at like 62% overall. That means that they're 62%. Their performance on the aggregate, when you add up all the performance metrics, is 62% better than the league average, which is insane for the National Football League. They're on pace for records in that split. No team has ever finished plus 60% in DVOA on the season. Normally, everybody's a little bit more tightly bunched in the National Football League. All right, thanks for the question. That one is good. Eric Gomes compliments Mike. It is good at making it sub mode. If you want to ask a question, go ahead and sub. I think it cleans up the chat a little bit. That was a good idea from Mike. So anyway, DVOA is just a more substantive, nuanced, accurate measurement of who's good and who's not. Looking at yards per game could be really deceiving. DVOA is going to help us look at teams in a more sophisticated fashion. Yeah, the chat is nice and clean. That's nice. All right, if you have a question, go ahead and put it up there. I'm not going to go back through all of them. Sorry. I mean, it's unrealistic to hit everything. So if it's a really pressing question, don't mind about firing it away twice. What has happened to Charles Omenihu? He was on fire early in the season. Omenihu still has a lot of pressures this year. It seems that the other edge rushing spot, the counterpart to Nick Bosa, just isn't hitting as often. And this is one thing about the 49ers D-line and their defense as a whole. The D-line isn't as good as it was in 2019 when it was at its prime, right? When D Ford was roaring off the edge. Leads me to ask what's going to happen with this defensive line this offseason, because you only have one edge rusher under contract opposite Nick Bosa, and that's Drake Jackson, the rookie, who's had quite a few pass breakups, like tips at the line of scrimmage. I think he's got 7 or 8 this season. He was near the NFL lead just a couple weeks ago. Didn't play last week because the 49ers wanted to go heavy against the run with defensive tackles. But obviously they want Drake Jackson to develop into an every down bookend for Nick Bosa. But you still need more guys on a rotation, even if that happens. And Jordan Willis is on a contract year. Charles Omenihu is on a contract year. Samson Ebukam is on a contract year. So I don't think you're going to re-sign all 3 of those guys. Early in the season, the 49ers were firing a little bit more off of both edges. Now they're not getting quite as much production from the other edge. Eric Armstead coming back, though, has helped Nick Bosa's production for sure. And I'm wondering what they're going to do. I'm wondering, I think Omenihu is still playing well. I think that Jordan Willis is really playing well. I mean, Jordan Willis played one of his best games as a 49er, had that run down to the sideline. I mean, you wouldn't think it, but Jordan Willis is one of the fastest 49ers defensive linemen because he's big. You're like, okay, I don't expect this 270-pounder to be able to move that well, but he flew to the sideline. And then, I mean, the vertical leap that he showed to go up and get that big fumble recovery off of the Nick Bosa strip sack. So to me, Jordan Willis might be the guy that the 49ers are able to pick within their system to be one of their primary opposite pieces to Nick Bosa. But Charles Omenihu, we'll see if he prices himself out or not. A lot of times, if he's close to getting sacks and not quite getting sacks, that could be the difference between a big contract offer on the free agent market and not. So, I'm going to delve further into that this next week. I think it's a really good question. I want to look to see what the pass rush productivity scores for all these guys are now that we're so far into the season. I know I looked at it a few weeks in, but we could look at the splits over the course of the year to see where the 49ers might have regressed a little bit. Do the players have a curfew for New Year's Eve? Yes, they do. And they're staying out in Henderson, which is 15 miles away from the Strip, and that is intentional from the 49ers. I think the Raiders facilities out there in Henderson, at least a lot of Raiders players live out there. You get a little bit more. You're up in the, I think a little bit of foothill area. You could correct me if you're wrong. If you could correct me if I'm wrong and you're from Las Vegas, but obviously bigger plots of land and a little bit more suburban. And that's where the 49ers are staying. Probably it's a Marriott or something out there in Henderson instead of staying on the Strip. So players, their families and friends, they'll all be partying New Year's Eve. but the 49ers are going to be under lock and key over at the hotel. Meetings and then bedtime curfew. The NFL has curfews. I know the NBA and the Major League Baseball, they don't. Those guys go out, especially MLB players. But in football, you've got to focus on that game because there are so few of them in relation. No, Johnny Dell. Well, Kinlaw have a snap count restriction this week. Go check out this guy's YouTube. He's got some of the best film breakdowns. Johnny Dell's Football Academy. He's got some of the best film breakdowns. I watch them every week. They're really well edited. I learn a lot. I try to watch as much film stuff as I can from people that know what they're talking about. And Johnny Dell definitely knows what he's talking about. His question is, will Kinlaw have a snap count restriction this week? I think he will. But I think it's going to be higher than last week's, which was 15. He got in for 16 just by happenstance. I'm guessing it'll be up to 20, 25. They're slowly ramping him back up. I mean, you're playing two bad teams the next 2 weeks. I don't think that you need to play Kinlaw overly much. This is kind of like the preseason for him, coming off of a 12-week absence, get him ready to shoulder a full load come playoff time. Yeah, these are the stats. Bosa has 17 and a half sacks, and Ebukom's at 4.5. I want to see the pressure numbers too. That's something I'm going to look up because I know that somebody like Amenahu was generating a lot of pressure early in the season. And I think still is. He's in on a lot of these plays. And even though he's not quite finishing with sacks, he is affecting these plays big time. And Ebukam, I think, has had a few nice ones as well. He's dealt with some injury issues this season. And Jordan Willis, this last game, obviously, was generating some heat for the 49ers. So but I think the pressure numbers are a little bit more important to look at, especially since Nick Bosa is hogging so many of the sacks because he's so good. So just something to keep in mind and something I'll address on a different show after I have some time to look up some of the numbers. Yeah, game film is available to the masses. It's over on NFL Plus. You could subscribe there. They have the coaches tape up on NFL Plus. How will the 49ers account for Renfro? He can be a pain. Well, Renfro normally lines up in the slot. So, you'll see some Jimmy Ward on him. Jimmy Ward might also be working a little bit against Darren Waller. That's a bigger pain than Renfro, literally. I mean, Darren Waller is a big, tall tight end. Jimmy Ward actually told me he thinks that Darren Waller might be the only tight end faster in the NFL than George Kittle last week. So that's going to be interesting to me. I mean, the Raiders, again, they do have some weapons. Devontae Adams, we know all about him. Darren Waller, Josh Jacobs, you mentioned Hunter Renfro here. It's all about how the 49ers game plan against the slot, but Jimmy Ward has been improving in that regard. He's made some big plays in that nickel cornerback position. And, the 49ers will deploy a linebacker like Dre Greenlaw to work that slot as well. And that's why Greenlaw's so good. That's why he was a Pro Bowl snub, right? That's why he deserved the Pro Bowl because he's so fast. He's in there on a lot of these pass coverage plays, and it makes the 49ers defense really, really multiple. 49ers, the Empire asks me, are you an NBA fan and who do you like? Yeah, I like watching the Warriors play. I grew up watching the Bulls in the 1990s. I was born in 1988, so I was part of that generation. It didn't matter where you lived in America, I feel like boys growing up in the 1990s were Bulls fans, even if the team in their city was pretty good because the Bulls were better than them. They went 6-0 in those NBA finals. So I grew up watching the Bulls in an era where the Warriors weren't really good, right, in the late 90s. And then you move into this era when I lived in San Francisco and the Warriors won their first title. What was it, 2014, 2015? Yeah, the 2015, or was it? Yeah, 2014, 2015 was the season. And, everybody kind of caught that Warriors fever, and it's been awesome to do so ever since. I still think the Warriors have something to say about this year. I think they're a game under 500, but what bothers me about the NBA is that regular season. So long. Too long. Should the 49ers worry about Hufanga relying too heavily on instincts? Not if the instincts are right. I think the instincts are great, especially combating the short passing game, the screen game, the run game when on a run blitz. I think what you're alluding to here is that Hufanga has slipped a little bit in some deeper pass coverage concepts. Those are two different types of instincts, though, right? You got short game crashing instincts versus the hold off on biting instincts, and maybe those are the latter is where Hufanga needs to improve. But he's a Pro Bowler for a reason. I mean, he's been a missile out there on the field. He's made some really good plays in coverage. He's picked off some passes this season. Is he a perfect player? No. But is he a first-year starter? Yes. And I think that there's still a lot, to be accomplished by Talanoa Hufanga, who's got a great work ethic moving forward. Yeah, I've met both Jed York and Mark Davis, the owners of the respective teams, 49ers, Raiders, this weekend. After this Niners Raiders game, do you think the league will seriously consider a mercy rule? Oh man, the NFL will surprise you, man. You could think that these games are going to be big time blowouts. I mean, I'm going to predict the 49ers are going to win. I'll spoil that for will the 49ers beat the Raiders, so I'm not going to hide that. But it could be closer. At the end of the day, the 49ers are still traveling on the road after Christmas. They've won a ton of games in a row. They could be a little bit overinflated. They are playing their third string quarterback, who's been awesome, but there could be a bad game from him at some point here. Even first string, top guys have bad games. Brock Purdy's impressed the hell out of me and seems like it's going to be a pretty even keel, but this is the NFL, so anything can happen on any given Sunday. That being said, the chances that the 49ers blow the Raiders out are much higher than the chances that the Raiders beat the 49ers. Mike thinks that maybe we're going to see Josh Johnson. That'd be crazy. Oh, that's good. Some tea on this cold day. No, Jackrabbit Jenkins is not going to be starting. It's going to be Diamond Lenore. John Mack thinks that Josh Jacobs is all that the Raiders have. Adams won't be targeted due to the lacking quarterback. Well, it depends on the blocking up front, right? That's always the big thing. The Niners pass rush not quite as overpowering as it was in that 2019 season. So we've seen some route concepts develop. I mean, we saw those third and longs that Washington was able to pick up last week. Charvarius Ward called it some coverage BS on the 49ers part. He thinks they can tighten it up, and they have to tighten it up because if the rush is not getting to the QB on every single down like the 2019 rush, then that leaves your secondary up for some intermediate passes if they're not on their P's and Q's. And Jarrett Stidham can hit those passes. He's paid too. Jarrett Stidham is not just some guy that you found off the street. I mean, this is a legitimate quarterback, SEC. He's got an arm. And if you give anybody in this league some time to throw, generally somebody's going to get open. So the key is to keep him covered for as long as possible and to remove as much time to throw for that QB as possible. Yeah, this is interesting. Stidham is a little bit more athletic than Carr. He's younger. Kind of like Purdy, more athletic than Jimmy Garoppolo. So maybe you see a little bit more movement. It's, all in all, I think it's going to be a good game for the 49ers to start to really sharpen their sword for the playoffs. I mean, Max Crosby is as good of an edge rusher as there is outside Nick Bosa. So Mike McGlinchey can work on his craft against a guy like Crosby. You got a big tight end in Darren Waller that you need to cover. You got a slot in Hunter Renfrow. You have a premier wideout in Devontae Adams. You got a couple good offensive linemen on that Raiders side that you can work against if you're the 49ers D-line. I mean, it's not as big as a playoff game, but it still has implications. The 49ers will be scoreboard watching, or at least their fans are going to be scoreboard watching to see if Minnesota and Green Bay is going the way they want it to. The 49ers need Green Bay to beat Minnesota. That would have, it's essentially worth another playoff home game, right? So potentially. So there's still a lot on the line in these games, but not as much on the line as there is in the actual postseason. So it's a great time to sharpen your sword before the real intense games in January show up. Godzilla says that Derek Carr can join his brother David on television. Sometimes I don't think that Derek Carr is going to do that while the Raiders are still playing. But you see it sometimes. I think Drew Brees did it. If your team doesn't make the playoffs and you get on one of those network shows with a suit on, it's almost like an audition for some of these guys who might be retiring soon. I don't know where Derek Carr is going to be in his career in that regard, but I think he probably still has quite a bit of football left. But you could just get up there as a guest commentator on TV and maybe parlay that into a future hosting job after you retire. You look at Emmanuel Sanders, Richard Sherman, a couple guys from that 2019 team now up on the desk before, after, and during these NFL games. Will Waller be an issue in the slot? I think Waller's an issue anywhere he lines up. I mean, you got a 4.45 40. He's tall, he's strong, good hands. I mean, he's a really good player. So 49ers are going to have to account for him in this game. Best way to account for weapons like that is to throw off that quarterback's timing with a good pass rush. Everybody's asking about Garoppolo to like every single team. I got the Jets. Somebody else was talking about the Texans, I think. I forgot. Yeah. Somebody else was talking about the Texans. There's going to be like 13 quarterback needy teams this year. A little too early to talk about that. Jimmy Garoppolo spotted in the locker room the other day on a scooter. Will Charvarius Ward shadow Devontae Adams, or do you think Ryans will want Diamond Lenore to get some snaps against one of the premier receivers in the game? Maybe a little bit of both. I mean, whenever we've seen Ward do some shadowing, it hasn't been 100% of the time. So, again, though, I think the 49ers kind of treat this as an experimental game for some of this kind of stuff because you are tuning up for the postseason. So you want to cross all your T's and dot all your I's when it comes to deployment of efficiency, when it comes to deployment of your roster in the most efficient way possible. Does Micah Parsons get double teamed as much as Bosa? No, he doesn't get double teamed as much as Bosa. Bosa, last year's chart was insane. Bosa was way up at the top of pass rush win rate, despite the fact that he was way up in the corner, basically because of the double team rate. So Bosa gets chipped and everything more than Parsons. I think Bosa, is very clearly a better pure pass rusher than Parsons. Their numbers are roughly equal with Bosa having more sacks, but I mean, Bosa's got a little bit more Hulk to him, a little bit more of a power move, right, than Micah Parsons, who's super explosive. You can't take that away from him. But there isn't a better pass rusher in the game right now than Nick Bosa, and it's reflected in those 17 and a half sacks. Is this a trap game for the 49ers? Maybe. I don't know exactly how to define trap game, like what exactly that is. I guess you're favored over a team, and then they kind of get you because you overlook them. Could be any week though, because the 49ers are favored every single week nowadays. Question about Chris Borland retired early. Should Tua consider retirement? I don't know. I'm not in Tua's shoes. And would Carr be a good replacement in Miami? It's from Gammon Brown right here. I think Derek Carr is better than he gets credit for. I think the Raiders have been dysfunctional around him. Maybe that's just me standing up for a fellow guy from the Valley. He's from Bakersfield. So, yeah, I think I would like to see Derek Carr on a team not named the Raiders to see what he can do because they haven't armed him with a good defense at all. I don't think he's a top 5 guy, but they kind of unceremoniously they ran him out of town here for the end of the season. He's not going to even be at the game. He's away from the team, so he's not a distraction. But that's that whole thing. They didn't want Derek Carr to get hurt because that would trigger injury guarantees and really screw over the franchise. Yeah, it does seem like Raider players are upset about Derek Carr's benching. He wasn't having a good year this year. It wasn't a performance-related benching, though. This was about, hey, we're giving up on the season. We don't want this contract to become an injury guaranteed issue. That's what it was. It was kind of a cheap move by the Raiders, but it was a business move, and that's why a lot of people saw it coming before it did happen. I'm not sure that Cody Kessler is better than Derek Carr, but I know that's a Bakersfield joke, right? Cody Kessler. Was Cody Kessler better in high school? Kessler's younger than Carr. Kessler. Oh, no, they're probably around the same age, huh? Yeah, because Kessler was at USC, I believe, in 2012, right? And Derek Carr was definitely at Fresno State in 2012, 2013. So I saw Cody Kessler play basketball for, I believe he went to Centennial in Bakersfield. I saw him play against Mount Whitney, my alma mater, in the Paulie Wilhelmsen tournament, which might be having the finals going on right now in Visalia. A really good basketball tournament that they play in between Christmas and New Year's. Brings a lot of the high school basketball teams from around the region there. And Cody Kessler played for Centennial. I want to say this was probably in, oh boy, 2010, 2011, maybe 2009, right before he graduated and went to USC, where he was the starting quarterback for a while. Do I think the team will quit on McDaniel since he benched Carr? No, I don't think so. I think NFL guys are always trying to put their resume on tape. I just think that the Raiders don't have enough talent to keep up with the 49ers, just like a lot of teams, but the Raiders are especially talent depleted now. Because not only because of Carr, but because of Chandler Jones, the IR, Denzel Perriman at IR. It's a tough situation for the Raiders. They've got some skill position talent. We talked about that, but it's going to be really, really tough for them to keep up with the 49ers. Yeah, so the Paulie Wilhelmsen is happening tonight. I wonder who's playing. One, I think like Redwood and Mount Whitney one time played in like the semifinals. It was crazy. Those are like the two rivals. Like one of the high schools, Redwood in Visalia, is 2 blocks away from Mount Whitney. So they end up playing for the cowhide. That's the rivalry game. They end up playing for a piece of cow skin. Like Visalia, California is like Texas in the middle of California. Actually, Bakersfield is like Texas. Visalia is a combination of Texas, Kansas, and a little bit of Tennessee in it, I would say, for Visalia. But they do, the Texas part of Visalia is where they're playing for that cowhide. J-Dog Boston says, sit Trent, Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, Fred, Dre, Mooney, and Bosa. He thinks the 49ers will still win this game. They could beat anyone in the playoffs on the road. Injury's the only thing that could stop them. So the problem with this is that you want to sit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. You're not going to have enough guys to field a roster at that point, right? Because you need at least 46 up, and you only have 53 on the 53-man roster. Assuming everybody's healthy and you sit 8 guys, that's only 45 up for the game. You don't have enough players to play. But there's guys that are on the 53, not on IR, that are hurt right now, like Jimmy Garoppolo, Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell's on IR, sorry. But Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt, and he's on the 53-man roster. Kevin Givens is hurt. He's on the 53-man roster. So those are 2 spots that you just can't mess with right now. So you're down, if you sat the 8 guys that you want to sit, you're inevitably going to end up with a roster that doesn't have enough players to go out and play. So you have to play guys in the NFL. It's not like college football. Yeah, don't worry. They're not sitting Bosa. I'm sure we're going to get some comments on that one. Womack was the backup nickel. Does that mean he jumped Thomas? Thomas is more of an outside corner. I think that Womack has jumped Ambry Thomas at the outside cornerback position, though. So I don't think nickel tells us anything about Ambry Thomas's spot. I think the fact that Samuel Womack entered the game ahead of Ambry Thomas as a backup outside cornerback says that he is ahead of Ambry Thomas on the depth chart. All good questions. Is Lenore good enough? Concerned about the deep threat? Yeah, I think Diamador Lenore is good enough. I think he's a lot better than the worst cornerback the 49ers had in 2019. That was Kello Witherspoon. I mean, teams were picking on that side of the field. Remember Minnesota picking on that side of the field entering the playoffs? That's how the rise of Emmanuel Mosley came to be that year, right? He replaced the Kello Witherspoon. Is Kyle Shanahan's name not being brought up for Coach of the Year? I mean, I brought it up on the show. I brought it up on Twitter. He's definitely should be, if not the leading candidate, one of the leading candidates for Coach of the Year for the reason that you put up on that screen. You hope that Kyle Shanahan doesn't run Christian McCaffrey into the ground. Well, that's why Ty Davis Price is starting to get some carries. Jordan Mason still dealing with a hamstring. We'll see if he's back in the mix this week. Debo Samuel was back at practice. I don't think that he's going to play. Maybe he will. I don't know. Maybe they'll get him on a little snap count there and get him into the action. But yeah, you want to generally limit Christian McCaffrey's workload, but you also want to make sure that Christian McCaffrey is the gravitational force that he can be. And if he gets a lot of carries, teams are going to crash toward him. You run play fakes off of that. I'm going to post a video of the 49ers QBs today working on some play fake stuff during warmups at practice. I mean, go ahead and, sub to the channel, set the notification icon so you could see this. A lot of those play fakes are going to be working off of Christian McCaffrey fake action because it's awesome. Christian McCaffrey draws the defense like a tractor beam, and it's burned the 49ers' last couple opponents. When was the last time the 49ers went undefeated in the NFC West? That's a good question. Did they go undefeated in 2011? Because they beat the Seahawks both times that year. If they went undefeated in 2011, and I'll look it up. Let's look. 2011 49ers schedule. If that happened in 2011, if it happened, then it happened in 2011 because the 49ers beat the Seahawks twice that year, including on Christmas Eve in Seattle. No, it didn't happen in 2011. 49ers lost to Arizona 21-19 in week 14. They lost to Baltimore, to Arizona, and to Dallas. 13-3, and then obviously to the New York Giants in the NFC title game. So you have to go back because they certainly didn't win all their division games in 12 and 13 because the Seahawks got them in those years at least once. And they didn't do it during the dark ages because the Seahawks always beat them, just for starters. So maybe you have to go back to you're going to have to go back a long time for 49ers team that didn't win a division game, that didn't lose a division game. Maybe back to the time of Steve Young, because I don't think it happened with Jeff Garcia. 1997, says somebody. Yeah. All good. All right. Where are we at? Godzilla asks, do you think the 49ers will steamroll teams in the playoffs like they did in 2019? If they're at home, then yes, especially the first couple of rounds. I think they could do it. So at home against somebody like the Vikings in the second round, they could do it. On the road against the Eagles, or at home even against the Cowboys NFC Championship game, that might be a little bit closer. But 2019 was something else. Bold prediction from Lewis. Bosa gets the sack record. Kittle gets single game receiving record by tight end. So the sack record for Bosa, that's Aldon Smith's 19.5. Bosa needs 2 to tie it. He's at 17.5. If he gets 2, then Bosa will have 44 sacks in his career on the regular season. Aldon Smith had 44 sacks in his 49ers career as well. It took Aldon Smith 50 games to get to that 44. Bosa is about to play game number 50. So that could be a good one. I should put that in my game preview. I forgot to put that. All right, couple more questions. Should there be concern that the 49ers had a soft schedule and the one good team that they played, they were blown out? They played good teams. I mean, Miami's a good team. Kansas City is Kansas City. Kansas City is, I think, the top challenger from the AFC because of Mahomes. I think he breaks a lot of the balance equations that you look at. So remember, the Kansas City game was close in the fourth quarter, and then it got out of hand. The 49ers let it get away from them down the stretch. So you can only beat who's put in front of you, right? And the 49ers have done that. For over 2 months now, they haven't lost a game. And I don't think there should be that much concern because if you're winning games in the NFL by an average margin of 17 points, which has been the case, you're going to be okay. And that carries over against, better competition. Point differential is a really good predictor in the NFL, and the 49ers have been on top of that. Mark thinks the NFC is weak this year. It might be weak, but Dallas and Philly are the two strongest outside the 49ers of maybe a weaker field. Maybe they're not as good as the Bills or the Chiefs, but still think you got some contenders around the league that can make some noise. And the 49ers would do well to get as many home games as possible in the playoffs. Paul thinks the AFC ain't much better. There's a lot of parity around the league in general, and people, and it's really hard to gauge who's going to be good and who's going to be bad. Just think back to the preseason and free agency. Everybody's like, oh, the AFC West is going to be unbeatable. I mean, they're so mediocre, it hurts. There's a couple really terrible divisions. Both of the Souths are terrible, right? NFC South, AFC South. I think the NFC West is average. The 49ers are really good. Seahawks behind them. The Cardinals and the Rams are bad teams this year. So I think both conferences, have some mediocrity, a big clump of it, and then have some teams that have risen to the top, the cream of the crop. And those are going to be the teams with the biggest chance to win during this postseason. The AFC playoffs will indeed be insane. All right, guys, I'm getting tired. I appreciate you saying that you like the show. I'm getting tired. Want to eat something. Got to rest up for Vegas. Wanted to get a nice little Q&A session in here. 35 minutes. It's a good length show. Will the 49ers beat the Raiders? That's going to come out tomorrow morning. So be sure to stay tuned for that because I'm going to put out the article there. We got a $1 a month sale for The Athletic and the New York Times that you should be all over right now. And then we'll talk to you from Vegas. Then we'll do some shows from Vegas and just get after it over the course of this weekend. All right, guys, everybody, thank you. Appreciate everybody watching. I will talk to everybody next time. Have a great Thursday night.